Sometimes the first betrayal isn't a scream, it's a whisper you didn't listen to. Mistress sends dog to attack pregnant wife, but what the dog does next will shock you. A loud growl broke the peaceful morning as Elara stepped onto the sunlit granite path in her satin robe. The birds had just started chirping and the scent of lavender lingered in the air. Then everything shattered out of nowhere. A huge Doberman charged at her. Before she could scream, it leapt, knocking her down hard against the cold tiles. Teeth tore into her wrist, blood gushed and pain shot through her arm like fire. Elara gasped, trying to pull away, but the dog was strong, fur and fangs tearing into her like she was prey. Her vision blurred. She thought it was the end, then. Suddenly the dog stopped. It didn't back away, but its growl softened. It looked straight into her eyes. Confused, hanging from its neck, glinting in the sunlight, was a golden collar with 2 letters engraved, MV, Marissa Vale. In that moment, Elara knew this wasn't a random attack. It was sent. Someone wanted her dead, and she now knew exactly who. She lay on the granite floor, blood pooling beneath her, pain pulsing through her wrist. Her breath came out in shaky gasps, but what shocked her more than the attack was what happened next. The maid Clara came running, but instead of calling Vincent, Elara's husband, her fingers trembled as she clutched the phone and whispered, "Call Dr. Lucas's." Elara's heart skipped. That name hadn't been spoken in years. Lucas, her ex, her old protector, the man she once loved before Vincent came into the picture. Minutes later, Lucas arrived faster than any ambulance. He didn't ask questions. He wrapped her wrist, held her gaze, and told her she was safe. Now in that small moment, Elara realized something. Even her maid didn't trust Vincent anymore. And maybe, just maybe, neither should she. Later at the private clinic, Elara sat in silence, bandages covering her wrist, her body sore from the fall. When Vincent finally arrived, there was no panic in his face, no worry in his tone. He didn't ask if she was okay. His first words were cold. "Why were you outside?" Without warning, then came another blow. Marissa said the dog was scared. "Did you provoke it?" Elara's stomach twisted. He believed Marissa, not her. He leaned in, close eyes, sharp voice flat. "There's more to this, isn't there?" Elara didn't reply. She didn't cry. She simply watched him. And what she saw in his eyes wasn't love. It was calculation, control, like she was a problem he needed to manage, not a wife he needed to protect. In that moment, something inside her broke and something else started to grow back home. While Vincent was busy making calls and pretending everything was fine, Elara slipped outside. Her arms still throbbed, but her mind was sharper than ever. She scanned the courtyard, staring at every corner, every stone. Then she found it, a small black lens tucked into the stone pillar, a hidden camera. Her fingers trembled as she removed the SD card and plugged it into her laptop. Her heart pounded as she saw it. Marissa, in her satin heels, walking the dog. She leaned down, whispered something into the dog's ear, then let the leash slip from her fingers. Elara barely had time to process the betrayal before Vincent burst into the room. His eyes landed on the screen for a split second. Shock flickered on his face. Then, without a word, he walked over, tapped a single key, and deleted the footage. Just like that, no explanation, just a cold look. For a moment, Elara sat frozen, staring at the empty screen, as if her whole world had just been wiped away with a single keystroke. Her chest tightened, a raw, hollow ache tearing through her. She had clung to that tiny thread of proof, believing it would save her, and now it was gone, erased like she never mattered. A deep, burning humiliation flooded her veins, but she pressed her lips together, forcing herself not to cry. Then he walked away, and Elara was left staring at a blank screen and the terrifying truth that Vincent had chosen Marissa again. But Elara didn't scream. She didn't cry. She didn't even question him. She simply closed the laptop and sat in silence, not because she was scared, but because she was done fighting with no proof. Now she was planning. She let Vincent believe he had won. She let Marissa parade through the halls in her satin robes and smug smiles. But deep down, Elara was changing. She watched. She listened. She healed quietly, carefully, but she wasn't alone in the corners of the mansion, behind locked doors. Someone else was watching in the small security room hidden from the rest of the estate. A shadowy figure rewound the camera footage, pausing on Marissa's smile, Vincent's silence, and Elara's eyes, full of fire. Fingers tightened around a silver pen, eyes narrowed with quiet rage. Elara thought Marissa was the biggest threat, but the real danger hadn't even stepped out of the shadows yet, and when they did, everything would change forever. Elara had been searching for a simple envelope, a check she left in Vincent's drawer, but when she pulled it open, her eyes didn't land on paper. Instead, a small silver key sat hidden under some documents. It was cold, smooth, and unfamiliar. A tag was tied to it, scribbled with the numbers of a bank's branch and a safe deposit box number. Her heart skipped. She stared at the key, confused and shaking. Why would Vincent keep something like this hidden from her? They shared everything, or at least that's what she believed slowly. Her fingers curled around the key. A sense of dread washed over her, like her whole world was about to flip. She waited until the next morning, then went to the bank without telling anyone. The air inside the vault room felt thick. Her palms were sweaty as the clerk opened the box and handed it to her. What she saw inside made her knees. Wobble letters, photos, legal papers, and most shocking of all, a black folder with Marissa's name embossed in gold on the front. Elara's fingers shook as she opened it. Inside were documents showing large monthly payments from Vincent to Marissa going back years. Even before Elara married him, a photo slipped out. It showed Vincent and Marissa on a beach holding hands, laughing like lovers. The date in the corner, 2 weeks before their wedding. Elara gasped that one key had just unlocked years of lies. Her fingers lost strength, and the folder nearly slipped from her grasp. Her vision blurred with unshed tears as a wave of betrayal crashed through her chest so fiercely she thought she might collapse right there. It wasn't just betrayal. It was a lifetime she thought she had, disintegrating in a single, cruel moment. Deep down, a small voice had always whispered doubts, small cracks in the perfect picture. But she had ignored it. She had chosen love over instinct, blind faith over quiet suspicion. And now, that choice mocked her with brutal clarity. She stumbled out of the bank, heart pounding, the folder clutched. In her hand, everything had changed. Marissa wasn't just some mistake. She had been part of this from the start. And now Elara knew there was no going back. Elara couldn't sleep that night, her mind spun with everything she had seen in the folder. But something still didn't make sense. Why would Vincent keep those records? Why protect Marissa like that? The next day, she met with a private investigator, Lucas. He had once worked for Vincent's company, but Elara trusted him. She handed him copies of the documents and photos. "Find everything you can about Marissa," she said with a broken voice. 2 days later, Lucas called her with news that left her shaking. "You're not going to believe this," he said. "Marissa used to be engaged to Vincent's brother, Soren." Elara froze. Soren, the one who had vanished 5 years ago. Everyone believed he had died in a boating accident, but his body had never been found. Vincent never spoke about it, saying it was too painful. But no, Marissa, Soren, it didn't make sense. Lucas showed her more proof. Old engagement, announcements, photos of Marissa with Soren at charity events, and a medical report with Soren's name filed a month before he went missing. Elara felt her breath leave her body. Suddenly, everything started to connect. Marissa had been part of the Crosswell family long before Elara came in, and then Soren vanished. Vincent married Elara, and Marissa returned as Vincent's assistant. Elara's heart broke all over again. She thought she had married a man who once loved her, but what if she was just a replacement for someone else? What if Marissa had never left, just waited for her moment to return? And what if Vincent helped her? Elara stared at Soren's face in an old photo, wondering if he had really died or if something darker had happened. The deeper she went, the more dangerous the truth felt. Elara sat alone in Vincent's office. While he was away on a business trip, something about the drawer key still haunted her. She decided to go back this time to search every inch of the office behind a locked cabinet drawer. She found another envelope, thick and heavy. Her hands trembled as she pulled it. Open inside was a prenuptial agreement, a version she had never seen. The clauses were brutal. In the event of divorce, Elara would get nothing, no shares, no property, not even child custody if deemed unstable. But the most terrifying part, her signature was missing. She had never signed this. She remembered signing a prenup, but it wasn't like this. This one had pages that didn't exist before and taped to. The back was a life insurance policy with Elara listed as the insured and Marissa's nonprofit foundation as the second beneficiary. Her heart pounded. This wasn't just betrayal. This was something darker. Marissa would gain millions if Elara died, and with a baby on the way, Elara's fear grew. Was she safe? Tears stung her eyes. Everything was a lie. The marriage, the promises, the future they planned. It was all part of something twisted. The love she once felt now felt like poison. Why would Vincent need this kind of prenup? Why would Marissa be tied to her death benefit? Elara pressed a hand to her swollen stomach, fear tightening in her chest. Suddenly, all the whispered conversations, the secret meetings, the quiet phone calls, they made horrible sense. This wasn't just about a failed marriage anymore. It was a set-up good, and now she was the target. She grabbed the documents and left the office. Knowing she needed help, but not knowing who to trust anymore, Vincent returned from his trip with a smirk, telling Elara they were invited to a gala hosted by one of their biggest investors. Elara tried to refuse, but Vincent's voice turned sharp. "You're still. My wife acted like it, dressed in a tight black dress that barely fit her swollen belly." Elara entered the ballroom, gripping her clutch like a shield. All eyes turned to her, but not out of admiration. They whispered, they stared, and then Marissa walked in wearing a flowing white gown that shimmered under the lights. Marissa looked like a twisted bride. Her eyes locked on Elara's and held them like a dare. As the crowd parted, Marissa moved closer, holding 2 glasses of champagne. One accidentally spilled all over Elara's dress, soaking her belly, staining the fabric. "Oops," Marissa whispered sweetly. The crowd gasped. Elara stood frozen, humiliated, her face burning. She turned to Vincent, praying for him to defend her, to say something, but he just stood there. Calm, expressionless. "Clean yourself up," Vincent said coldly. Not even glancing at her, Elara felt her heart rip. She had expected him to protect her, to love her. Instead, he let her drown. The whispers around her grew louder, cameras flashed. She was a laughingstock, tears welled in her eyes, but she swallowed them down. For a fleeting moment, shame curled inside her chest tighter than any fist. She hated herself more than she hated him, for being blind, for believing in fairy tales spun by a man who never deserved her trust. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction. Marissa smiled like she had already won, but Elara knew. This was just the beginning. That night, as she stood alone in the bathroom, washing the champagne from her skin, she looked at herself in the mirror. No more. She whispered. She would not be the weak one. Not anymore. 2 days after the gala, the company board held an emergency meeting. Elara wasn't invited, but she showed up anyway. She was still technically co-owner as she entered the room. She felt the chill in the air. Vincent sat at the head of the table. Marissa stood behind him, holding documents like an assistant. But her smile said otherwise. The board members looked uncomfortable. Elara stood tall, even as her belly ached from stress. "What's going on?" she asked. Vincent looked up casually. "You've been removed from all financial decisions," he said like it was no big deal. "Effective immediately." Elara's breath caught. "You can't do that," she said. But then Marissa stepped forward, holding a stack of papers. "Actually," she said sweetly, "your emotional instability makes you a liability." Vincent nodded in agreement. "And you've missed several meetings. That's grounds for removal." The betrayal cut like a knife. Elara turned to the board. "You all know me. You know this isn't fair." But no one looked at her. Not one person stood up. She was alone. Her hands trembled as she gripped the edge of the table. The stress was too much. A sharp pain shot through her stomach. Her knees buckled. Vincent didn't move. Marissa stepped back, but Lucas, who had just entered, ran to her side. He caught her before she collapsed. "You're okay," he whispered. "I've got you." Elara clung to him, tears falling. Her body was breaking under the weight of it all, but she wouldn't fall yet, not until she found the truth, not until she brought them down. As Lucas carried her out, Elara looked back at Vincent. He didn't blink. He saw it now. He was never going to protect her. He was the enemy, and now she was done. Pretending Elara had prepared herself for betrayal from Vincent. She had even steeled her heart against Marissa's venomous words and cruel actions. But nothing could have prepared her for Gloria's change. Her mother-in-law, once her biggest supporter, her guide, her strength, now stood beside Marissa, like they'd always been on the same side. The woman who once held Elara's hand during prenatal checkups, who cried tears of joy when she first saw the ultrasound, was now whispering into Marissa's ear at board meetings and walking past Elara like she didn't exist. The shift was sudden, sharp, and cruel, and it cut deeper than anything Elara had ever known. Gloria had once called Elara the daughter she never had, but now she smiled at Marissa, toasted her at dinner parties, and defended her in public, like they were best friends. The pain of Vincent's betrayal was nothing compared to this. It wasn't just about losing a husband. It felt like losing a family she thought was hers. Elara sat in the corner of the mansion's grand hall, watching as Gloria and Marissa laughed over glasses of wine, her hand resting on Vincent's arm like everything was perfect. But the final blow came when a lawyer arrived with a new copy of Vincent's will. Gloria had helped draft it, and in that will, Marissa was named as the heir to half of Vincent's empire. Half. Elara wasn't even mentioned. Her unborn child wasn't considered. It was as if she'd already been erased from the picture as her hands trembled. Holding that paper, Elara realized she wasn't just fighting for her place in Vincent's world. She was fighting to be remembered at all. And in that moment, the betrayal was no longer just emotional. It became war. The hits kept coming. Elara hadn't even caught her breath from Gloria's betrayal when she heard whispers of Vincent's next plan. At first she dismissed it as a cruel rumor, but when she overheard Marissa on a call laughing and saying she's too unstable to be a mother, her blood ran cold. Vincent wasn't just trying to erase her from his life. He wanted to take her baby too, and he'd found the perfect excuse. Her emotional breakdown, the public outburst at the gala, and the stress she'd endured had left a trail: doctor's notes, security, footage, tear streak, cheeks caught on camera. He was building a case to declare her unfit. Elara was pregnant, heartbroken, and cornered. The walls of the mansion, once warm and familiar, now felt like a cage. Every servant avoided eye contact. Every door felt locked. Vincent moved around like a king on his throne, smiling in public, plotting in private, and Marissa, she was already shopping for baby clothes like the child was hers. Elara considered running, leaving everything behind, disappearing before the court papers could come. But something inside her refused. She stood in front of the mirror, hand on her swollen belly, and whispered, "I won't give you up." No matter what Vincent did, no matter how much Gloria or Marissa turned against her, she would not surrender her child. She might be losing the battle now, but she wouldn't lose the war. She started gathering documents, calling old friends, quietly, recording conversations. If Vincent wanted to prove she was unstable, he'd have to lie, and Elara was done. Staying silent, her heartbreak had turned into rage. She wasn't a weak, weeping wife anymore. She was a mother, and she was ready to fight. Hunter had always been more than just a dog, loyal, quiet, watchful. He followed Elara around the mansion, like a shadow since Soren disappeared. Hunter had clung to her more than ever, almost like he was protecting her from something she couldn't see. But it wasn't until the gardener casually mentioned that Hunter used to be Soren's personal companion that a chill ran through her spine. Why had no one told her that before? That dog had been with Soren everywhere until the day he vanished. Elara didn't let the thought go. She found an old contact, an animal trainer who had once worked with the family when she met him in secret. He looked at Hunter and froze. "This dog's been through trauma," he whispered, "and he remembers things." What he revealed next made her blood run. Cold Soren had trained Hunter using very specific commands, signals that only he knew. But now Hunter reacted differently. When certain names were said, when the trainer whispered, "Marissa," the dog growled, and when he said Soren, the dog whimpered, lowered his head, and backed away. The trainer leaned in and said, "This dog's scared of something or someone." That was the moment. Elara knew Marissa and Vincent weren't just cruel. They were dangerous. What if they had something to do with Soren's disappearance? The pieces were falling into place, and the dog had been silently screaming the truth. The whole time, Elara looked into Hunter's eyes and saw more than pain. She saw a warning. Something terrible had happened to Soren, and Hunter had seen it. He couldn't speak, but his reactions were louder than words. Elara walked away from that meeting with one terrifying thought in her mind. Soren hadn't just left, he'd been made to disappear. Elara couldn't sleep that night. She sat with Hunter in the garden, running her fingers through his fur, thinking about what the trainer said. Her eyes drifted to his old collar, worn out, stitched strangely at the bottom. Something about it felt off as she turned it over. Her fingers found a small opening, and inside was something hard. She tore it open and pulled out a hidden flash drive. Her heart pounded so loud she could barely breathe. What was hidden inside a dog's collar that someone clearly didn't want her to find? She plugged the drive into her laptop, praying. It wasn't corrupted. The screen blinked, and then a video played. The footage was grainy but clear enough. Soren was there, standing in the study, shaking, holding something in his hand. Marissa stormed in, furious. "If you open your mouth, you're done," she spat. "I've taken down stronger men than you?" Soren backed away, and Vincent appeared behind her, calm, collected, dangerous. Soren shouted, "You poisoned the old man, and I know it. Elara finds out." But then the footage cut. Elara stared at the screen, frozen. Soren had known something big, and Marissa had threatened him. Vincent was there, not shocked, not confused, but calm, as if he'd expected it. Elara felt sick. A deep shiver racked her body as she pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to hide, but she couldn't look away. Betrayal, blood, fear, it bled from the grainy screen straight into her heart, suffocating her. She realized then that every gentle smile, every soft kiss from Vincent had been a mask covering a monster she had shared her life with. This wasn't just a family feud anymore. This was criminal. Soren didn't disappear because he was scared. He disappeared because he was silenced, and this footage, this tiny piece of metal hidden inside a collar, was the only evidence left. Elara knew what she had to do. She couldn't let this stay buried. She needed answers, and she needed them fast. Because if this flash drive was real, then Marissa and Vincent's secrets were finally cracking open. Elara couldn't breathe as she stared at the screen, but then another video automatically began playing. This one was darker. Soren sat in what looked like a basement, pale and weak, his voice barely a whisper. "If anyone finds this, I'm probably gone," he said, coughing. "Marissa poisoned me. Vincent helped cover it up. I pretended to be dead because that was the only way to survive." Elara's hand flew to her mouth. Her worst fears weren't just true. They were worse than she imagined, he continued. "I saw what they did. The old man never died of natural causes. Marissa wanted the inheritance. Vincent wanted Elara's silence. I thought I could escape, but I've been hiding ever since. If this gets out, I'm dead for real." The screen went black, and just like that, everything changed. Elara wasn't losing her mind. She wasn't paranoid. She had been hunted, played, used. She backed away from the laptop, her heart pounding, her hands shaking. The war she thought she was fighting was bigger, darker, and far more dangerous. She grabbed her phone and called the only person who could help, a fearless investigative journalist known for taking down powerful families. He sent the footage, but the moment she hit send, the lights flickered. Her phone buzzed again. A new message. "Unknown number. Nice try, Elara, but you just declared war." Her blood turned cold. Marissa was already on to her. The secrets weren't safe anymore. But Elara wasn't scared, not this time. They wanted to silence her, but now she had the truth, and the world would soon see who Vincent and Marissa really were. The question now was, how far would they go to stop her, and was Soren still out there, hiding in the shadows, or already gone forever? Elara stood frozen, the document trembling in her hand. Her name was there, Elara Crosswell, but it wasn't a birth certificate or medical report. It was a death certificate, and the date listed, it was for next week, the exact day her delivery was scheduled. She wasn't dreaming, she wasn't imagining. She was holding proof that someone had already planned her death. Her knees buckled slightly, the document slipping from her grasp before she caught it, clutching it to her chest like a lifeline. Panic crawled up her throat, raw and burning, choking her until she had to stagger back and press herself against the wall just to stay upright. Her child, her life, all mapped out to be erased like she was nothing but a footnote. A crushing thought sliced through her panic. If they succeeded, her baby would be born into a world where Elara no longer existed. A world where no one would tell her daughter who she was, or how fiercely she had been loved. The idea of her child growing up alone, surrounded by monsters, was more terrifying than her own death. Panic crawled up her throat as she flipped through the papers hidden in the back of Vincent's office drawer. A forged signature, a hospital stamp, a planned surgery marked high risk in red ink. She wasn't supposed to survive childbirth, and when she died, the inheritance from her late father, worth millions, would automatically transfer to Vincent as her legal spouse. But there was more in the margins of the document. A note was scribbled in delicate cursive: "Once she's gone, the child is mine." It was Marissa's handwriting. Elara clutched her swollen stomach. Her child was part of this plan. They wanted to erase her. Not just kill her, but erase her existence, as if she never lived. She backed away, breath short, heart pounding. They were going to kill her during childbirth, bury her quickly, and walk away with everything: her money, her child, her life, and she had only days left. The people she once loved were planning her funeral before she even took her final breath. Her hands shook as tears rolled down her face, but she didn't scream. She didn't cry out. She didn't run. She looked at herself in the mirror and wiped her tears. If they wanted her dead, they would have to fight harder, because Elara was done being the victim. She was going to live, and she was going to make sure they wished she hadn't. Elara didn't want to believe it. She had hoped somehow Vincent was being manipulated, that he wasn't fully involved. But when she found the second file inside his personal vault, hope shattered like glass. It was a consent form signed with Vincent's own hand. The document gave full medical power of attorney to Marissa. If anything unexpected happened during childbirth, underneath it in bold the words "Do not resuscitate" were checked. Elara's heart broke again, but this time it didn't cry. It screamed. Vincent had planned it all. He wasn't just allowing it, he authorized it. He gave Marissa the legal right to pull the plug. He signed away his wife's life for money, power, and that woman. Elara remembered the nights. Vincent rubbed her belly and whispered dreams for their child. All of it. He wasn't dreaming of the future. He was counting down her final days. She looked at the pen Vincent had used. She remembered how he smiled while he lied, how he kissed her forehead while betraying her, and in that moment Elara felt something inside her die. The last piece of her that loved him gone, her tears dried like fire. Turning to ash, she whispered to herself, "This is war." Her child would not be raised by monsters. Her soul would not be buried by liars. She would show the world who Vincent really was. No more secrets, no more silence. The man who once vowed to protect her was now preparing her grave, and she would rise from it, not as a victim, but as the woman who destroyed him. He signed her death, but she was about to sign his downfall. With every breath she had left, Elara was going to make them regret ever thinking she'd die quietly. The gala was the most anticipated event of the season, filled with billionaires, royalty, and media moguls. Everyone was waiting to see Marissa shine, but when Elara entered the grand ballroom, time froze. Gasps echoed through the crystal chandeliers. She wasn't in black. She wasn't in mourning. She was wrapped in a radiant sapphire gown that shimmered like the ocean under moonlight. Her belly full and glowing made her presence even more defiant, and by her side, holding her hand, was Hunter, the silent enforcer once loyal to Vincent. Now her shield. Marissa choked on her champagne. Vincent's jaw clenched. They had declared her dead. Yet here she was alive. Bold, unshaken, Elara walked through the crowd like fire through ice. Then she raised her hand. Single click. The screen behind the orchestra changed. It wasn't part of the program. Suddenly the room was filled with Marissa's voice. "The poison works slowly," she said in the video. "He won't feel a thing until it's too late, once Soren is gone. The trust moves to Vincent, and Elara's baby can be ours." Screams erupted. Faces turned. Cameras flashed. The video played again, louder, showing Marissa standing over a bottle, whispering secrets into a phone. It was a confession. Undeniable, unforgivable. Marissa tried to run, but Hunter stepped in front of her. Vincent stumbled forward, yelling for the music to cover it up, but no one was listening. Elara didn't speak. She just stood there, letting the truth scream louder than any words ever. Could her sapphire dress glittered under the chandeliers like the weapon? It was. This wasn't just a statement. It was a strike, and with one video, Elara shattered the image of perfection they'd built, turning their lies into her justice. Just as Vincent lunged toward the stage to cut the power, the doors burst open, the room turned, silence fell, and there he was, Soren, alive. Leaning on Lucas, pale but breathing, the man they all thought was buried days ago was standing at the top of the staircase. Marissa's knees buckled, Vincent's face went ghost white. Soren stared straight at Elara, then nodded. She smiled softly. Finally, the final piece of her justice had arrived. Soren's voice, once quiet, now roared across the ballroom. I was poisoned by someone I trusted, and it wasn't Elara. Murmurs exploded into chaos. People shouted, cameras zoomed in. Soren took the mic, shaking but strong. Marissa tried to kill me, Vincent, you, and they tried to kill Elara too, but she saved me. She saved us all. Marissa collapsed into a chair, hands trembling. Vincent grabbed her arm, whispering, say nothing. But it was too late. The truth was out. Security guards began pushing through the crowd. Reporters threw questions like knives. Is this true? Were you part of the plan? Did you try to kill your wife? Elara remained silent. She didn't need to answer. The look on Soren's face said enough. The man they tried to erase was now their executioner, and the woman they tried to bury had become their judge. Vincent tried to speak, but his words were lost in the rising storm. Marissa covered her face, but the cameras didn't blink. Elara looked at them, her betrayers, and saw fear for the first time, real fear, because they realized too late that the game had changed. They weren't the hunters anymore. They were the hunted, and the whole world was watching. Vincent fell to his knees, his voice cracked as he begged Elara, please, don't say anything more, we can fix this. Marissa, still trembling, pulled out a checkbook with shaky hands. 10 million, she whispered. Walk away and disappear. We'll give you anything. Just stay silent. The room waited. Reporters leaned in, phones recorded every second. Everyone wanted to hear Elara's answer, but she said nothing. She didn't need to. Her silence burned hotter than any scream. She stared at the people who planned her murder, tried to steal her child, and silence her forever. She looked at the man she once loved, who chose greed over life. Then she stepped forward and handed the final folder to the lead investigator. Inside were medical records, audio tapes, bank transfers, every dirty secret. They tried to bury. Marissa's lip quivered. Vincent's hand shook. Elara. No, please, you'll destroy everything. She stared at him, ice cold, voice low. That's the point. And with those 4 words, the empire began to fall. Stocks plummeted. Phones rang nonstop. Investors fled. Every deal Vincent built collapsed like sand in water. Marissa's sponsors pulled out. Her face vanished from magazines overnight. Lawsuits poured in. Elara never screamed. She never cursed. She let the silence speak, and it roared. People, once blind, now saw the truth. She didn't want revenge. She delivered justice, and with every secret she exposed, the empire that once stood tall burned piece by piece. Elara turned away, her gown trailing behind her like a flag of victory. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. They were left in the ashes of their own lies, and the world finally saw who the real queen was. But as she stepped into the night, a shadow followed her, because one final truth had yet to come out, and it could change everything. Elara had traded the glitter of chandeliers for the sound of crashing waves. The penthouse, once a symbol of her painful submission to Vincent's world, was gone, replaced by a small coastal town where no one knew her name. Here, silence became her weapon. The stillness of the sea filled the spaces where whispers used to linger. She had disappeared from the tabloids, a ghost in the wind, yet beneath the calm exterior something was building in the quiet. She found strength, strength to let go and strength to begin again. Vincent had thought he owned her, that she would forever remain shackled to his empire. But Elara had learned that true power lay in walking away, and now from this peaceful retreat. She built her revenge quietly. Every move was calculated, every decision a piece of a larger plan. It wasn't loud, it wasn't flashy, but it was hers, and it was enough, just as she knew didn't always come with a bang. Sometimes it came with the stillness of a heart that had been broken, but refused to stay shattered. No one knew it, but Elara was no longer a victim. She was the architect of her own redemption, and though she stood alone on the edge of the shore, the quiet winds whispering around her, she felt more powerful than ever. But even then, in the hush of the waves, there were nights when the loneliness crept in, a soft ache that no victory could fully soothe. Some nights, she would catch herself glancing over her shoulder, half expecting the past to come crashing back. Healing was not a straight path. It was a journey paved with echoes. The world had mocked her pain. They laughed at the woman who had once been a billionaire's wife, now left to pick up the pieces of her shattered life. But Elara had never been one to let her suffering define her, instead of wallowing in her grief. She built something that would give hope to others who had suffered as she had. She established a foundation for betrayed women, using the money she had once been forced to accept as hush payments to fuel her cause with every check she signed. Elara struck back at the world that had torn her apart. Every woman who came to her for help, every woman who had felt the sting of betrayal was now part of something larger. They were no longer invisible, no longer alone in their pain. Elara's foundation became a beacon, a symbol of resilience in the face of heartbreak. She didn't need to raise her voice to make her point. The checks were her weapon, the donations, her retaliation, every single dollar, a silent slap to the empire Vincent had tried to build on the backs of those he had betrayed. She wasn't just taking back what was hers, she was using it to rewrite the rules. Vincent had thought he could break her, but instead she had built something more lasting, something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. For the first time in years, Elara walked into a room where no one recognized her. No one whispered about her in the corners. No one gawked at her with pity. She was just a woman, one among many with nothing to prove. The luxury of anonymity was a gift she hadn't realized she longed for. Until now, the years spent chasing love in a gilded cage felt like a distant memory. No longer did she crave the diamonds, the dresses, or the spotlight. What she wanted now was peace. But even peace carried the sting of what she had lost, the life she had once known. The life of wealth and security was gone, and in its place was something she had never anticipated. She had chosen a different path, one that was harder but ultimately more fulfilling. The emptiness she had once filled with diamonds and designer bags was now filled with purpose and the quiet satisfaction of knowing she was rebuilding as she stepped into this new world. She knew it wasn't perfect, but it was hers, and for the first time in a long time that was enough. She had no headlines anymore, and that was the sweetest freedom. She could ask for. Vincent's empire had crumbled. The face that once adorned the covers of magazines, the man who had been the darling of the business world, was now the subject of scandal. After scandal, it hadn't taken long for the cracks in his perfect life to show. As Elara had quietly rebuilt, Vincent's world was imploding. His business partners, once loyal, now turned on him, their whispers of betrayal growing louder. Every day, investors who had once eagerly flocked to his side were now running for cover, pulling their money, their support, and their trust. Vincent's wealth, built on the lies he had told and the people he had hurt, was now slipping through his fingers. The mansions, the cars, the yachts, all the symbols of success that had once filled his life were now being auctioned off to pay for his mistakes. The empire he had spent years building was burning to the ground, and Elara never had to lift a finger. Every deal he had made under false pretenses, every promise he had broken, was now catching up with him. He had thought he could hide behind money and power forever, but it had all been a house of cards, and now there was no escape. His reputation was in tatters, his empire was in ruins, and the world had stopped adoring him. Vincent had learned the hardest lesson of all. Betrayal has a cost, and it's always higher than you think. Marissa's fate had been sealed in the courtroom, but it wasn't the sentence that broke her. The judge had handed down 15 years, but it wasn't the length of time that haunted Marissa. It was what came after. The cell she was placed in was nothing like the luxurious apartments she had once enjoyed. The air was thick, suffocating, and the harshest sound of all was the barking of the dogs in the neighboring cells. Every night, as she lay in the dark, the howling seemed to echo louder and louder, mocking her, reminding her of the life she had once had, and the secrets she had tried to bury. 15 years in prison felt like an eternity. But it wasn't the bars or the orange jumpsuit that kept her awake at night. It was the constant reminder of Hunter, the man she had been willing to sacrifice everything for, and now locked behind bars. She had nothing, no power, no luxury, and no escape from the consequences of her actions. The dogs never stopped barking, and in the endless darkness, Marissa realized that the man who had promised her the world had left her to rot. and that was the punishment she would carry with her forever. Soren had been poisoned, betrayed, and left to die, but against all odds, he had survived now as he walked free. The cameras were waiting for him, desperate for his story, for the juicy details of his fall from grace, but Soren wasn't interested. He had been through enough. The spotlight, the attention, the whispers, they meant nothing to him anymore. He turned down every offer, every interview, every opportunity to make himself a hero. Instead, he chose healing. He chose peace. Soren had learned that the real strength wasn't in revenge or redemption. It was in letting go, and though the world wanted him to be their symbol of triumph, Soren knew that his true power lay in quietly rewriting his own story, one where he could heal away from the cameras and the noise. His silence was his final victory. In the soft morning, light, Elara held her baby girl in her arms, the child's small fingers curled around hers, and in that moment she realized she had never truly lost everything. The love she had once sought in wealth and luxury had been replaced by something deeper, more lasting, the love of a child. And as Elara gazed down at her daughter, she named her Hope, because that was what she had become, the hope that had guided her through the darkest days. Lucas stood beside her, his presence, a quiet strength. He didn't need to speak, to make her feel safe. He had never asked for a place in her life, but he had earned one as their daughter reached for his finger. Elara felt something shift in her heart. She didn't need to say, "I love you." It was already there in the way they stood together, in the way they shared. Their silence, hope was their new beginning, and Elara could finally see the future. She had longed for it, wasn't perfect, but it was hers, and that was all that mattered. Lucas had never demanded a place in Elara's life. He didn't expect grand gestures or declarations. He simply stayed, and in that quiet commitment, he had earned a place in her heart as he fixed the broken window. Elara watched the simple chaos of their life together, the everyday moments that made up their love. Hunter, the dog they had adopted together, slept peacefully beside the crib. His presence, a reminder of the quiet love that had formed between them. Elara never asked for more. She didn't need it. The world around them had been filled with noise, with betrayal, and with the ghosts of the past. But here in this small corner of the world, there was peace. The chaos of their past had softened into the gentle rhythm of everyday life. Elara still guarded her heart, still carried the scars of her past. But with Lucas, she didn't have to fight anymore. She could just be, and that was enough. On the edge of the cliff, Elara stood with the wind whipping through her hair, the ocean crashing violently below. She looked out over the horizon, the sun setting in the distance, casting a golden glow over the sea. Her daughter played nearby, giggling as Hunter, their dog, nudged her gently. Lucas leaned against the doorway, watching them both, his presence a quiet comfort. Elara took a deep breath and whispered to the wind, "You didn't win." The past had tried to destroy her, to break her down, but it had failed. She was no longer the woman. She had been broken, lost, and drowning in the lies of the past. She had rebuilt herself piece by piece, until all that remained was the woman. She had always been meant to be strong, resilient, unbroken. Her final letter, the one that Vincent would never receive, wasn't a goodbye. It was a warning, a reminder that she had risen from the ashes of his betrayal and that she would never be silenced again. And as the wind carried her words into the horizon, Elara knew that the past would always follow her, but it could never define her. She was free, and that was the final victory. Banthan men, life doesn't always grant us justice in the moments we demand it. Sometimes it demands we endure, to hold the line, quietly, until the tide turns in our favor. Like Elara, we are not defined by what breaks us, but by what we choose to build in the ruins. Stoics have long taught that true strength is not found in avenging the past, but in mastering the self, in becoming so steady that storms may howl and betrayals may sting, but we remain unshaken at our core. Healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means carrying the lessons, not the weight. Remember, the scars you bear are not signs of defeat. They are proof you survived battles others never even saw. You are stronger than the storms that tried to silence you. Keep rising. If this story touched you, we'd be honored if you would like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue bringing you powerful stories of resilience and hope.